On a crisp autumn afternoon, as orange leaves danced across the hospital parking lot in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a white-haired, lost-looking man was left in a wheelchair, wrapped in an old blanket. His tired eyes watched his children walk away without a backward glance. This hurt more than any illness. He didn't understand why. I just knew I was alone. The silence inside the waiting room was as cold as the air outside. Nurses hurried past, doctors called names, and he, John, simply clutched the Bible to his chest. It had been his wedding gift, more than 5 decades ago. The words he read there were his only solace. But not even the Psalms seemed to ease the emptiness of that farewell. What had he done so wrong? Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith. For we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also want to take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot, thank you. Now, hold on tight, because what happened next, no one could have imagined. The hospital receptionist approached with a practiced smile and standardized questions. Do you have health insurance? Will someone pick you up later? John just shook his head. He wasn't even sure why his children had said they were taking him for quick checkups. It had all been so rushed. His granddaughter hadn't even given him a hug. It broke his heart. The on-call doctor, Dr. Elaine, tried to determine the reason for his hospitalization. But the elderly man seemed confused. There were no serious symptoms, no clinical urgency. It was as if they had simply left him there, abandoned. A hospital employee whispered to a colleague, "Another one the family left here. Sad, isn't it?" John heard, and a single tear ran down his wrinkled cheek. As the minutes turned into hours, and the hours felt like days, John began to remember the Sunday mornings he'd taken his children to church. He remembered the sandwiches he'd made, the toys he'd repaired with duct tape, the nights he'd stayed up nursing fevers. Where were those laughs? Those "I love you, daddies"? Had time erased everything? A young nurse named Madison was the one who noticed something strange. The man was polite, kind, and told old stories. But there was a sadness so deep in his eyes that she couldn't ignore it. Something didn't add up. Why did that man seem so out of place? She decided to strike up a conversation. "Do you have someone to call?" she asked gently. "I did," he replied. John hesitated as he revealed he had 3 children, Daniel, Mark, and Elizabeth. 3 names that seemed to have been ripped from the depths of his heart. Madison felt a chill. It wasn't uncommon to see elderly people left there, never to be retrieved. But there was something more to this case. The man didn't seem sick, just discarded. As if he was no longer useful to the family. It was too cruel. The hospital routine continued, but for John, every minute was a painful wait. He stared at the door as if hoping for a miracle. Maybe one of them would repent. Maybe they would come back for him. A father's heart always believes, even when all seems lost. He prayed silently. "Lord, forgive my children and protect each of them, even if I don't understand." The hospital tried to contact the children, but the numbers provided were out of service. One of the attendants even commented that the address on the form seemed incorrect. This raised suspicions. Had it all been planned? John remained silent. He didn't want to speak ill of his children, not even now. "They must be busy," he said, trying to protect the one who left him. Amidst the abandonment, something began to change within the young nurse. She began visiting his room even when she wasn't assigned. She brought him books, chocolates, even an old radio so he could listen to songs from his youth. John smiled for the first time in days. But what no one knew was that Madison was about to discover something that would change everything. One weekend, while cleaning out her closet, Madison found a wooden box hidden deep inside an old suitcase. When she asked John what it was, he simply said, "Memories, and a secret I've kept all my life." Madison was intrigued. Inside the box were yellowed letters, old photos, and A sealed envelope with a lawyer's name on it. But that mystery is for later. For now, Madison kept the box safe, never imagining that the envelope would change the fate of everyone involved. And meanwhile, across town, John's 3 children were busy discussing the sale of their father's house. What they didn't yet know was that they were about to lose much more than they expected to gain. At the hospital, John began writing something in his hardcover notebook. The words came with difficulty, but his heart was firm. It was a letter, not of sorrow, but of truth. He wanted his children to know who he was before he was forgotten forever. The nurses watched him with admiration. There was something sacred in that serenity. One night, Madison brought a thick blanket and sat beside him. They talked for hours. John told her about his youth, his love for his late wife, and the sacrifices he made to raise his children. "I gave my life for them," he said with a sad smile. Madison held his hand, and something inside her stirred, a desire to protect him, to honor that history. But the next morning, John wasn't in his room. He'd been transferred to another wing on orders from management. The reason? They claimed he had no responsible family members. Madison was furious. She searched for answers, but encountered obstacles. It was as if they wanted to erase the man from the system. But she wouldn't allow it, and that's when she decided to investigate the lawyer's name on the envelope. He dialed the handwritten number. A deep, formal voice answered. "Dr. Peter Wallace's office." Madison explained everything. The lawyer asked her to deliver the envelope in person as soon as possible. There were clauses that couldn't be ignored. Madison felt the weight of it. Something big was coming, but was it really what she thought? Meanwhile, Daniel, the eldest son, received a call from an unknown number. It was the lawyer's office. He didn't like the formal tone. "What are you calling about? Our father is already in the hospital, isn't he?" The lawyer's assistant was blunt. "You were mentioned in a confidential document, and you need to appear urgently." Daniel laughed. It must be another headache. Mark, the second son, was in Las Vegas when he received the same call. He ignored it and chose to stay at the casino. Elizabeth, who lived in North Carolina, answered coldly, "I don't have time for this." He made his choices. None of them knew that decision would be the turning point in their lives. The storm was about to arrive. At the hospital, John's condition began to worsen. The doctor suspected an infection, but it was something deeper. It was as if his heart was giving out. The absence of his children was like an invisible illness. Madison was always by his side. She brought Bible verses and prayed softly. "There's still time, Lord. Touch their hearts before it's too late." And then something unexpected happened. Elizabeth showed up at the hospital, but not for her father, for the box. She'd heard about the envelope and demanded access. Madison confronted her. "You didn't come to see your father. You came for what you think he has." Elizabeth was furious. And it was at that moment that John opened his eyes for the first time in 2 days and whispered, "It's not too late." The reunion was tense, without hugs, without tears. But something in John's gaze shook Elizabeth. "Are you here for me, or for yourself?" he asked tenderly. She hesitated, and in that silence something inside her broke. The words she didn't say hurt more than any accusation. And before leaving the room, Madison handed the envelope to the lawyer. The wheel of fate was beginning to turn. Days later, all the children were gathered in the lawyer's office, for the first time in years, without knowing exactly why. The atmosphere was tense, squinting glances, clipped sentences. Dr. Wallace entered with a black folder. He opened the envelope and said, "What I'm about to read now will change everything you think you know." The silence was absolute. Hearts raced, and right there in the center of the room, a will began to be read. It wasn't just about possessions, it was about buried truths, about forgiveness, justice, and a choice no one could have imagined. And as each word was read, the children's expressions changed. They didn't know it, but they were about to discover that the man they left behind in the hospital was much more than they thought. Night fell over Grand Rapids, bringing with it a strange silence. Room 312, where John rested, was dark except for the soft light coming from the window. Outside, the full moon illuminated the rooftops, as if it too wanted to hear the man's memories. He was awake. He couldn't sleep. Not after everything. The wooden box, now in Madison's hands, seemed to hold more than just antiques. It seemed to hold secrets. As the hospital fell asleep, she returned to the room, holding the box gently. John smiled. "You want to know who I was, don't you?" Madison nodded with a curious look. "Then I'll tell you," and began. "I was born in Kalamazoo at the end of the Great Depression. My mother was a seamstress, my father a carpenter. We had almost nothing, but we had everything that mattered: faith, family, and bread on the table." Madison listened like a granddaughter listens to her grandfather. Every word was a window into a past worth remembering. John spoke of his youth, of the times when he worked at the train station, cleaning cars, dreaming of becoming an engineer. But life called him to another mission. "I met Martha at an outdoor church service. She had the sweetest eyes I've ever seen." Madison smiled. John held up a photo of her. This one was taken the day she said, "I do." His eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of good longing. "She taught me what true love was. She prayed with me every night. When the boys were born, she was the one who sang them to sleep." He paused. "Did you know Daniel was born with a high fever? We thought we were going to lose him. But God heard our prayer." Madison studied the photos. One showed a modest house with a white picket fence. Another showed her 3 young children playing with their dog. That was Rusty. He died of old age. But oh, how he loved those kids. John clutched his chest. "They were everything to me. I swore I'd never let them want for anything." The narrative took an unexpected turn when John revealed that he'd worked 3 jobs for nearly 20 years. By day, I was a janitor at the school. By night, I cleaned offices. And on Sundays, I worked odd jobs at events. Madison was shocked. "All this for them?" "Yes. Every dollar I saved went toward their college. And you know what hurt? I never complained." He recounted how he'd given up dreams, travel, even self-care. "When I needed surgery, I put it off because of the tuition." Madison was emotional. "And they knew?" John took a deep breath. "No, because real parents don't need their children to know everything. We do it out of love, not applause." But then came the first twist. At 55, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctor said I needed to rest. Madison's eyes widened. "And you rested?" "No, I worked even harder, because Mark hadn't finished college yet, and Elizabeth dreamed of being an architect." A black and white photo showed John in a janitor's uniform, sweaty but smiling. Madison ran her fingers over the image. They should have seen this. They saw it, but they didn't. The sentence hung in the air, and it was in this silence that he revealed, "I kept all this in the box, because I knew one day their memories would fail them." John pointed to one letter in particular. This one was written by Daniel when he was 7. He said he wanted to be like me. The handwriting was shaky but sweet. Madison read it aloud and cried. How could anyone forget this? Life distracts. The world teaches that the new matters more, but the heart always remembers. Another envelope contained a paid bill from Mark's university. That was the month I went without food, but I didn't fail to pay. Madison fell silent. This wasn't just a paper will. It was a testament of sacrifice. And she began to understand that this man's true legacy wasn't in inheritances. John smiled, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. God gave me strength, and he gave me time. But time, oh, time is a cruel teacher. Madison squeezed his hand. You still have much to teach. But he knew his time was running out, and he needed to get everything ready before the last page of his story was turned. It was then that Madison found a small blue notebook, leather-bound. The title was hand-engraved, Lessons I've Learned from God. She began reading aloud. They were reflections, prayers, and biblical thoughts written over the years. Life is like a ladder, daughter. Each rung is a choice, and each choice leads you closer or further away from God. Madison shivered. You wrote all this? Yes, and I wanted to give it to my kids for Christmas, but they were too busy. He turned his face away, hiding the pain. But maybe God put you here for a reason, Madison. Maybe this mission isn't yours by accident. She felt it deep down in her soul. From that moment on, Madison decided on something. She would read a page from the notebook to John every day. Each lesson was a pearl, and the more she read, the more she realized. This man was a hidden treasure, forgotten by the world, but never by God. And the most incredible thing, there were even more surprises inside the box. In the false bottom of the box, Madison found a donation receipt. John had donated part of his belongings to a Christian institution that cared for abandoned elderly people. I know what it's like to be forgotten. I didn't want others to go through that. Madison was speechless. His generosity was beyond comprehension. Another letter addressed to Elizabeth read, Daughter, I saw your drawings as a child. I know you loved architecture. I kept them all. Inside the envelope were carefully preserved childhood sketches. Elizabeth never knew her father collected her doodles, but soon she would find out, and that would change everything. A yellowed note read, Mark, I never told you, but I sneaked in to see you play piano at that performance. I didn't want to disturb you. I just wanted to see you shine. Madison held the paper carefully. This was love in its purest form, invisible to the eye, but eternal in the soul. And then, between the pages of the notebook, Madison found something surprising, a heavily underlined verse. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the earth. Exodus 21:12. John had written beside it, Even when they don't honor us, God honors us. This was more than faith. It was forgiveness. Days passed, and Madison began recording short videos of John telling his stories. She knew that memory couldn't be lost. Can I show it to your children? He smiled. If they want to see it, my heart still awaits them. And it was at that point that fate began to move again. On a rainy Sunday, Madison posted one of the videos on the hospital's social media. She didn't mention any names, simply writing, A father shares how he raised his children with love and sacrifice. Within hours, the video went viral. Comments, shares, people crying, and among those who saw it was someone who shouldn't have seen it, Daniel. As he watched the video, his expression changed. That old man, was that his father? The voice, the way he smiled, the Bible on his lap. He watched the entire video in silence, and when it ended, there were tears in his eyes. But he still didn't know what to do. He didn't even know that the video was just the beginning, because the next envelope would reveal even more. And the next morning, an anonymous call came into the hospital. Someone wanted to know more about John. Madison answered. Her voice was shaky. Is he okay? Who's calling? I'm someone who made a mistake, but I want to make it right. It was just the first of many steps, and so the memories of a father began to reach the hearts that had closed. The morning after the video was posted, the city was still waking up when Daniel left his home in Chicago for another day at the law firm where he was a partner. Dressed impeccably, he sipped coffee while answering emails. On the table, next to his laptop, sat a framed photo of him as a child on his father's lap, but he hadn't looked at it in years. Mark woke up later in Los Angeles to the sound of the sea lapping gently on his apartment balcony. He was a freelance musician, living between rehearsals, festivals, and travel. He had little contact with his family. He thought talking about the past was a waste of time. Living in the now is what matters, he always said. But a restlessness began to emerge that morning. Elizabeth, in North Carolina, was a university professor and award-winning architect. She had a busy schedule, numerous awards on the walls, and a routine that didn't allow for breaks. In her office, there were only photos of her with colleagues, students, and projects. No trace of her father, as if he had been erased from her biography, perhaps by choice. Each of John's children went their separate ways, far from the home where they grew up. After their mother, Martha, died, the family bond weakened. Sunday lunches ceased. Phone calls became rare, and as their father began to age, the excuses came. "I'm too busy. I'll call back. He'll understand." But time flies. Daniel justified his absence with logical arguments. "He's a simple man. He wouldn't understand my life now." However, he hid a silent guilt, not having told his father that he had gotten married, that he had a son, that he had been promoted. He kept all this to himself, thinking it would avoid judgment, but deep down he was just running away from himself. Mark lived a bohemian lifestyle without fixed roots. He thought his father would never understand him. "He never supported my music," he would tell his friends. But what Mark didn't know was that John sneaked into 2 of his concerts and gave a standing ovation, crying. He learned this much later, and the weight of this revelation stayed with him. Elizabeth preferred to rationalize everything. "He did what he could, but I managed on my own." She felt she had to mature too soon after her mother's death. She harbored resentment, but never confronted it. She simply distanced herself. A cold, calculated withdrawal, like a concrete wall built brick by brick over the years. As they went about their daily lives, the 3 siblings ignored the hospital's messages. They thought it was just another cry for help. "I can't do it now. I'll see later. I can't deal with this." None of them knew about Madison's post. But social media has mysterious ways, and within a few days, the video reached unlikely hearts. It was a friend of Mark's who sent him the link. "This man reminded me of your father." Mark pressed play without much interest, but the second he heard the voice, he froze. It was him, the father who said he was proud of his son. The camera showed the box of college receipts, the letters, the scribbles. Mark cried, and for the first time in years, she called her sister. Elizabeth answered impatiently. "What now? Did you see the video?" "What video?" "Our father, he is talking about us. They published it at the hospital." Elizabeth pretended not to be shaken, but hours later, alone in her office, she retrieved the video. She watched it in silence, and at the end, with tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Why now?" Daniel was the last to see it. A former college classmate shared it. "That video broke me, man. Remember your dad." Daniel almost ignored it, but he saw the face, and he knew. It was his father, with the same serene gaze, the same Bible on his lap. The words were simple, yet profound, as if speaking directly to him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt homesick, but pride was still strong. Each of the 3 carried unresolved guilt, decisions made in the heat of grief. They lived their lives as if their father were a distant memory. Only now, that memory was knocking loudly on the door, and conscience is a voice that never stops when the past meets the present. Madison, for her part, continued to care for John with increasing dedication each day. She recorded new passages. She read verses with him. One night he said, "If they ever come back, I want them to know they've already been forgiven." Madison fell silent, and she prayed softly, "Lord, touch these hearts. There's still time." Across the country, Mark began revisiting his old journals. He found a letter from his father, written on his 21st birthday. "Son, you're free to be whoever you want, and I'll always be here." He never replied to that letter, and now, all he wanted was to have that time back. Elizabeth contacted Daniel. She suggested they go to the hospital together, but he refused. "It's not time yet." She hung up angrily, but she decided to go alone. She spent days rehearsing what she would say. She wanted to confront him. She wanted to understand. But also, she wanted to see if there was still time to undo the knot in her chest. Meanwhile, Daniel received a notification. His father's lawyer wanted to schedule a meeting. The will would be read soon. This took him by surprise. Will! He hadn't known there was anything to be divided. He thought his father had no assets. But that envelope would reveal truths he never imagined. In the hearts of all three, something began to shift. Small cracks in the walls built over the years. The pain of regret is silent but profound, and even though they lived lives full of commitments, victories, and achievements, they all began to realize that something was missing. Something essential. Something they had left behind. Mark stopped playing for a week. Daniel began having insomnia. Elizabeth began looking at old photos. It was as if the memories had returned to collect a debt. Childhood, laughter, lunches in the backyard, bedtime prayers, all of it now returned, as if begging to be remembered. Gradually, each of them began to see their lives in a new light. And all of them, without exception, felt a void that could not be filled with success, fame, or money, because there are things that only a father's love can offer. And when that love is rejected, the heart feels it, even in silence. Daniel, on a rainy night, stared at his phone for hours. He considered calling the hospital, but fear paralyzed him. What if it's too late? What if he doesn't want me anymore? Pride fought against longing, but time was running out, and the envelope in the lawyer's office already had a set opening date. Mark called his ex-girlfriend. He asked about her father. He died last year, remember? And it hit him like a lightning bolt. Time, life, death. Everything seemed more fragile now. He got in his car and drove for hours, aimlessly. He ended up falling asleep in the car seat, in front of a church he'd attended as a child. Elizabeth bought a ticket. She decided to go to the hospital, but she kept it a secret. She wanted to see for herself, to know if that man was still her father, or just a stranger. And what she found there shook everything she thought she knew, because the reunion wasn't what she expected. In the hospital room, John looked at her, not with hurt, but with love, as if she'd returned from a long journey. "You came," he whispered. Elizabeth said nothing. She just sat beside him, and for the first time in decades, she stayed, silent, but present, enough for something to begin to heal. But there were still 2 left, and the lawyer had already confirmed the date. Within 3 days, everyone was expected to be present. The envelope would be opened, and with it, secrets, decisions, and a destiny no one could have imagined. The life each of them had led without looking back was about to collide with a past that would no longer be ignored. That cold Tuesday morning, Madison arrived at the hospital early. Something was different in her heart. Ever since meeting John, she felt her life was changing from the inside out. It was as if caring for him were a sacred mission. She didn't know why, but she knew God was guiding her every step. With the wooden box under her arm, she entered room 312. John was asleep, breathing heavily. The heart monitor sounded steady but faint. Madison approached, adjusted the blanket, and took his hand. "Good morning, Mr. John. The Lord has much to teach us again today." Every day she felt more empathy, more love, and more responsibility. He wasn't just a patient. He was a man full of history, faith, and pain that she wanted to help heal. Madison had no living grandparents, and John had filled that space in her heart in an unexpected and profound way. As the days went by, she began recording John's teachings. He created a notebook just to jot down his favorite quotes, advice, and verses. "The wisdom of elders is a gift not found in books," she told her colleagues. Some nurses laughed. Others began to gather around to listen. What no one knew was that Madison also came from a history of abandonment. As a child, her father had left the family. She grew up with her mother, struggling to survive. So seeing John forgotten by the one who should have loved him most touched her deeply. It was an old wound reopened and somehow healed. John could see the warmth in her eyes. "You're like a light in here," he said one afternoon. "God sends angels in the most unexpected ways." Madison laughed. And you're my tutor. But deep down, that phrase resonated with her. An angel. Had God really placed her there for a greater purpose? It was that very day that she discovered something that would change everything. While organizing John's belongings, she found a signed, notarized document. It was a letter of personal instructions, and her name was there as a secondary beneficiary. She froze. "What is this?" she asked herself. Confused, she confronted John. "You wrote this?" He nodded with a serene smile. "You treated me like a daughter, and no one else did." Madison sat down, unsure of what to say. "But I'm not your family. True love doesn't depend on blood, daughter. It depends on commitment." That was the first twist. John had included Madison in his will, not out of pity, but in recognition, for the kindness he'd received without self-interest. He saw in her what his own children had lost: compassion, presence, care, everything that defines true love. She was speechless, but Madison was torn. This could be misinterpreted. Her children, if they knew, might accuse her of manipulation. She considered tearing up the paper, returning it, but a voice in her heart said, "Wait, God is doing something here," and she decided to trust. She put the document away and remained silent. Days later, John's condition worsened. The doctors suggested palliative care. Madison was devastated. She spent the night by his bedside. She read the Bible with him. She sang old hymns. And for the first time, John held her hand and said, "You gave me more than my children. You gave them what they forgot to give: unhurried love." It was that night that Madison did something unexpected. She recorded a video with John in which he left a message for his children. "If you're watching this, it's because God still has something to say." He spoke calmly, without hurt. His eyes filled with tenderness. He asked for forgiveness. He offered forgiveness and said, "I still love you, even now." The video was sent to the lawyer and filed as part of the will. John wanted it shown after the document was read, a gesture of last hope, a reminder that even when forgotten, parents still pray for their children, even in silence, even when heartbroken. Madison then decided to do more. She created a small mural in the hospital hallway titled "Lessons from Mr. John." Each sentence was written in beautiful calligraphy, Bible quotes, life advice, verses of gratitude, and soon patients and staff began stopping to read them. Some people cried, others wrote back. The hospital administration found out and summoned Madison. "We can't allow this kind of personal exposure." She thought she'd be fired. But to her surprise, a second twist came. The mural would be transformed into an official humanization project. John became a symbol of dignity, and Madison was promoted. Still, she didn't celebrate. Her heart was torn. She wanted John's children to see what he was, the incredible man they were losing. They need to see what they've given up. But she knew that hearts don't always open at the right time, and maybe time was running out. Then a woman appeared at the hospital. It was Elizabeth. She had come in secret, without telling her brothers. When she saw Madison, she tried to keep her distance. But something in her changed when she saw the mural. She read each sentence with teary eyes, and at the end she asked, You've been taking care of him this whole time?" Madison nodded, and the two hugged. John wept upon seeing his daughter, and so did Elizabeth. It was a silent encounter, but full of truth. Madison discreetly withdrew. She knew this moment was theirs alone, and she prayed silently that the other two siblings would come too. But time continued its relentless course. The next day, Madison arrived early. She found John weak but smiling. "She's here," he whispered. "It won't be long now." And then came the third twist. The lawyer called. The children were going to the hospital, all three of them. Madison could hardly believe it. "Sir, is this it?" John just closed his eyes. At peace. She prepared the room. She tidied everything up. She put out flowers, applied light perfume, and arranged the blankets. John seemed to be asleep, but his heart was racing. It was the moment he'd waited so long for, and she walked away. She knew she needed to let this reunion happen, not as a nurse, but as someone who truly loved. At the reception, Daniel, Mark, and Elizabeth met. The mood was heavy, none of them knew what to say, and Madison led them to the room. When they entered, everything stopped. That man, once so forgotten, was now the center of their attention, but not of guilt, of love, and, perhaps, of forgiveness. The reunion was filled with silence, but also with tears, with words left unsaid, with hugs that took too long to happen. John, with what little strength he had left, smiled and said, "You came." Mark fell to his knees. Daniel held back tears. Elizabeth squeezed her father's hand tightly, and Madison outside cried alone in the hallway, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. She had accomplished her mission. She hadn't saved a life. She'd saved a story. And on the wall behind her, Mr. John's mural continued to grow, like a tree bearing fruit even when its roots are no longer visible. In that hospital, a forgotten life touched hundreds. An abandoned father taught about love, dignity, and faith, and an ordinary nurse became an instrument of God. Because when the world forgets, God remembers, and when no one else cares, He sends someone to make a difference. But what no one knew was what was yet to come at the reading of the will. A final choice, a closely guarded secret. Something that would forever change the fate of that family. And Madison was involved too. The wooden box sat there, in the center of the lawyer's office desk, like a silent character in the story. It bore the marks of time, small scratches, and an old, worn lock. None of the children had asked about it until that moment. It was as if they knew that what was inside could change everything. Dr. Wallace, John's lawyer, straightened the papers, polished his glasses, and said, "Before the official reading, your father asked me to show you something personal, something he's kept hidden for over 50 years." The three sons looked at each other. Daniel crossed his arms. Mark looked away. Elizabeth remained rigid. Carefully, the lawyer opened the box. Inside was a collection of small envelopes, old photographs, yellowed notebooks, and carefully organized personal items. Madison, sitting in the corner of the room, watched silently. This was much more than memories. It was a vault of feelings. The first thing Wallace pulled out was a handmade photo album, leather-bound, stitched with blue thread. Your father documented every birthday, every Christmas, every achievement. Opening the album, the first image showed John hugging his 3 young children in front of an old car. The year was 1984. Mark brought his hand to his face. He remembered that photo. It was the day they got their dog, Rusty. "He said he saved up for 3 months to give us that," he whispered. Daniel fidgeted with his fingers, restless. Elizabeth stared. For the first time they seemed to see their father, with the right eyes. The second item removed was a small manila envelope. The lawyer carefully opened it and removed a letter written in blue pen. "Children, if you're reading this, it's because I've already said goodbye to this world, but not to the love I feel for each of you." The words echoed through the room like a breath of eternity. "I've kept this letter for years, hoping someday you'd be ready to receive it, not with judgment, but with an open heart. Because forgiveness begins when we stop trying to understand and just feel." Elizabeth took a deep breath. Tears threatened to come, but she held them back. The first twist came with a small, red-covered notebook. Inside were records of every time John secretly attended his children's events. Presentations, matches, exhibitions. Madison was already familiar with this notebook, but for her children, it was new. "He was there," Mark murmured. "All the time," the lawyer replied. Daniel trembled, but he never said anything. "Because he didn't want to take away your shine. Your father believed that presence was more important than recognition." That hit like a punch to the gut. Their pride began to crumble before the humility of this man they had almost forgotten. Elizabeth then asked to see the letters. One by one, the lawyer handed over envelopes addressed to her children. There were dozens, all handwritten, some never sent, others returned. Each line carried longing, hope, and unwavering love. You were never forgotten, not for a single day. At the bottom of the box was a small pocket Bible. Inside was a bookmark with his children's names written in pen. Beneath it was a phrase, "I pray for you every day." Madison looked at it with teary eyes. This was where John placed his faith, not in possessions, but in redemption. The second major twist was hidden in a pale blue envelope. Inside was a deed. It was a piece of land in Michigan with a small house John had built in recent years. He'd never told anyone about it. The letter said, "This place is for when you want to be a family again. The door is always open." The children were shocked. He built a house with his own hands, brick by brick, Wallace confirmed. He said it was his last project. That changed everything. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was a second chance. Hope planted in concrete, an invitation to begin again. The third and most shocking revelation came last. The lawyer pulled out a sealed folder. "Your father left instructions that these contents be read only in the presence of the three of you and Nurse Madison." They looked at each other in surprise. "What does she have to do with this?" Daniel asked stiffly. Madison, disconcerted, replied, "I don't know," but her heart was pounding. Wallace opened the folder and began reading. It was a statement of transfer of assets. John had left a significant portion of his savings, a retirement fund that had never been touched, in Madison's name. The silence was total. Mark stood up nervously. "He gave her the money. He gave love in exchange for love," Wallace replied firmly. "And he made it clear it wasn't out of obligation, it was out of gratitude." Madison wanted to disappear, but John had made that decision lucidly and with his heart. Daniel, still seated, asked, "What about us?" "You also have part of the inheritance," the lawyer replied. "But the most important thing isn't here. It's what you do with it from now on." Elizabeth wept, and through her tears she said, "He just wanted to see us together. That's all." At the bottom of the box was one last letter. John wrote, "Forgiveness is the key that unlocks doors locked by pain. If you read this together, know that my heart is already at peace." The three looked at each other. For the first time in many years, they were sitting side by side, together. The lawyer left the room. Madison stood, but Elizabeth stopped her. "Stay, you're part of this too." Mark approached the box. He picked up the album. "Let's take this home, and maybe read it more slowly." Daniel nodded, for the first time, without resistance. There was something different in his eyes, something that looked like regret. As they left the office, the rain fell gently. The three children walked side by side, silent, but united by something they should never have lost, their father's love. And Madison, watching them walk away, knew their story wasn't over yet. The box was just the beginning. The lesson would come later. Because inside the box, there weren't just secrets. There was redemption. There was faith. There was forgiveness. Everything that can't be bought, can't be inherited. It can only be given. And John's legacy? That was just beginning. The office's conference room was completely silent. The air conditioning hummed softly, the wood-paneled walls muffling any sound from the street. In the center was an oval table, and around it sat John's three children, Elizabeth, Daniel, and Mark, and Madison, sitting discreetly to the side, still unsure why she'd been summoned. "Doctor." Wallace straightened the papers, looked at everyone, and said firmly, "What I'm about to read requires attention and emotional maturity. Your father was a very clear man in his desires." Daniel crossed his arms. Elizabeth clutched the handkerchief in her lap. Mark chewed on the cap of a water bottle. No one was truly prepared. "Before we talk about money or possessions, there's a story that needs to be told. Your father personally gave this to me 3 years ago. He asked that it be read only after his passing." The lawyer picked up an envelope sealed with red wax. The seal bore a symbol, a hand-drawn cross. He called it "The Truth That Sets You Free." Wallace broke the seal and began reading. The first sentence sent chills down the spines of those present. "Children, there's something I've never told you, and something I've carried with me for over 40 years. But now the time has come for you to know everything, because only with the truth can forgiveness be built." A heavy silence fell. The letter revealed that, as a young man, John had a relationship before meeting Martha. From this relationship, a daughter was born, a girl he could never legally register at the insistence of the woman's family. The child was taken to another state. For years, John tried to contact her, but without success. Her name was Grace, and she grew up believing her father abandoned her. But I never stopped looking. And when I finally found her, she was already a grown woman, married, a nurse. Everyone looked at each other, and that's when the first major twist hit like a bolt of lightning in the center of the table. "This daughter is Madison." Madison was shocked. Her hands began to shake. "No, that can't be." But the lawyer confirmed. "Your father took a DNA test with Madison's mother's consent years ago. He gave me the documents and asked me to keep them until this moment." John's children fell into complete silence. Mark was the first to react. "Are you saying she's our sister?" "Technically, half-sister." Elizabeth stood. "That's crazy." But something in the lawyer's voice said there was no room for doubt. Daniel just lowered his head. The truth had hit like an avalanche. Madison left the room. She was in shock. Everything made sense now. John's looks, his loving words, the way he treated her. But she'd never imagined this. Outside, she wept silently. Elizabeth followed. "Did you know?" "No, I swear to God I didn't." And in that instant, the wall began to crumble. Wallace continued reading. "Madison forgave me before she even knew the truth. She gave me more love in a few months than I received in years. And so, I have decided to share my legacy among the four of you, not out of justice, but out of love." Mark's eyes filled with tears. Daniel was speechless. The lawyer then revealed the division of assets. The land and the house John had built would be under joint management. The bank account and investments would be divided equally into 4 parts. But the most symbolic was the father's final decision. Madison would be named guardian of the family's spiritual legacy. This means she will be responsible for keeping alive the story, the teachings, and the wishes he left behind. He wrote, "I knew her as a nurse, but God brought her to be a light in our lineage." That broke through the emotional barriers. For the first time, the 3 children cried together. The second major twist came next. John had purchased a used bookstall and donated it to the local church with a special request that they take free of charge the Bible notes he had written throughout his life. Faith should be shared, not buried with the body. Madison, still shaken, returned to the room. She sat up slowly. Elizabeth looked at her differently, no longer as an intruder, but as someone part of the family. The silence lasted for long seconds. Then Daniel spoke. "Our father was greater than we imagined, and maybe we are smaller than we care to admit." The final part of the reading was a video message recorded by John weeks before his death. He was sitting in his hospital bed, his Bible on his lap. He looked into the camera and said, "If you've made it this far, then God has done the impossible. And that's already more than I deserve." He spoke about repentance, about God's grace, about the power of truth. "I made a mistake trying to shield you from pain, but I've found that the truth hurts less than silence. If you can, forgive me. If you can't, know that I still loved you." The video ended with a prayer and a smile. The third and final twist was brief but profound. The lawyer revealed that John had written in his will that if his 4 children accepted the truth, forgave each other, and jointly signed a pledge to start over, a final donation would be made. The house where they grew up would be renovated and transformed into a Christian shelter for abandoned elderly people. Mark was floored. Elizabeth clapped her hand over her mouth. Daniel swallowed. He thought of everything. He believed in the power of reconciliation, Wallace said. Madison couldn't hold back the tears. For the first time, she felt like she belonged, and surprisingly, she wasn't rejected. The four signed the pledge that same afternoon. No words, just glances and tears. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun was shyly peeking through the clouds, and hope was born in the same place where pain had once lived. A new chapter was opening, but there was still much to live for, because forgiveness is only the first step. Coexistence is the true test. And that new family, as unlikely as it is beautiful, was about to discover that John's true legacy didn't fit in an inheritance. It fit in the heart of the one who chose to love, even without understanding everything. The morning was cloudy when the four siblings returned to the hospital. The reading of the will still echoed in their hearts. Each silently tried to process everything. The revealed half-sister, the divided legacy, and, above all, the lesson of a father who, even absent, remained powerfully present. In the hallway outside room 312, Madison stopped. She took a deep breath. She wasn't sure whether to go in first or wait. Daniel noticed and led the way. You were the only one who was with him until the end. Go on ahead. She entered. John was sleeping soundly, his face serene, as if he knew his mission was almost accomplished. A few hours later, the lawyer called everyone back. There's one final step in the will, with specific instructions from your father. The tension returned to the air. Mr. John decided to include a conditional clause. Elizabeth frowned. Mark's eyes widened. Daniel just waited. They knew that with their father, nothing was a coincidence. The clause stated that the financial inheritance would only be released upon 3 individual and non-transferable commitments: a sincere apology, an annual visit to the shelter that would be built, and a handwritten letter to John, read aloud during the opening ceremony of the new home. Mark was outraged. Is he testing us even after he's dead? No, Madison replied calmly. He's teaching us. Daniel, head bowed, said, he wants to see if we've truly learned. Elizabeth silently began writing the letter right then and there. It was the first time she had spoken to her father from the heart. She read the first letter. Her voice trembled, but she didn't hesitate. Father, forgive me for being so cold. Today I understand that love isn't measured by words, but by presence. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on you. Tears fell silently. That room, once filled with sorrow, was filled with healing. Mark's letter was the second. Simpler, but true. I ran away because I was afraid I wasn't enough, but you saw me even when I saw nothing in myself. Thank you for not giving up on my music. Today, it plays because of you. Daniel read the last one. Brief, but devastating. I wasted so many years trying to prove something, and in the end, all I wanted was your hug. Forgive me. The lawyer stood and handed over a black envelope. And now, Mr. John's last letter. The one he left for the moment you said yes to starting over. Madison opened it with trembling hands and read aloud. Children, I knew you would come back, because the love I planted in you was real. And when it's real, it always finds its way back. The letter continued. The true legacy I leave is not in bank accounts. It is in the seeds I planted. Faith, resilience, forgiveness. If you can tend these seeds, you will have more than any fortune. The silence was sacred. There no one spoke, only feeling, because the soul understands before the body reacts. The second major twist came with an unexpected confession. The lawyer revealed that John, in recent months, had quietly donated part of his assets to social projects. Christian schools, orphanages, homes for veterans. He left almost everything. What remained was enough for his children to have the basics. He didn't want to leave behind riches. He wanted to leave behind a purpose, Daniel looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He didn't leave us the money, not in the way you expected. He left us something much more valuable, a responsibility. Madison handed each of them a small envelope. Inside, a symbolic key. He said, "These are keys to the heart. They only open when you're ready." The hospital was silent for the next few days, but within that silence, something was being born. The siblings began spending more time together. Madison, now recognized as a daughter, found in them not just relatives, but souls in transformation. It was a miracle in progress, and miracles aren't always noisy. Elizabeth proposed that the first event in their new home be a memorial dinner for John. Nothing fancy, just home-cooked food, old-time music and prayer. Everyone agreed, and something unprecedented happened. They laughed together, over old stories, over their father's clothes, over his slang. The pain began to turn to longing, and the longing to homage. Dinner was simple. The lights were low, a guitar in the corner, photos of John on the walls, and in the center of the table, his Bible was open to Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Everyone read in unison, and it was as if he were there, present, smiling, confirming that his legacy had flourished. Madison, in a symbolic gesture, placed the antique wooden box in the center of the table. That was the beginning of everything, and Daniel added, "And now is our new beginning." That night they didn't talk about bills or wills. They talked about love, about faith, about time, about reconciliation, and that is priceless. And the most surprising thing was yet to come. Late that night, a letter was found inside the box. No one had noticed it before. It was pinned to the bottom. Upon opening it, they read, "If you've come this far, it's because you understand. The love we leave behind is the only legacy that spans generations." And just below, in John's shaky handwriting, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Proverbs 22:6. The 4 children wept, but this time it was a soft cry, the cry of someone who finally understood what truly matters. As they left, a gentle breeze touched everyone's faces, like a breath of God confirming, "It is done." And what had begun as abandonment now became a mission. They hadn't inherited property, money, or status. They had inherited purpose, memory, and direction. And that was infinitely more powerful. Time passed in a flash. Months after the reading of the will, the 4 siblings were back on the land where John had built the small house with his own hands. There, in the heart of Michigan, a new chapter of their inheritance was being born. Not of possessions, but of lives touched. And they didn't yet know how much this would change everything. The John Whitmore Restart Home project was taking shape with the help of the community. Volunteers, donations, and even local businesses began to participate. The viral story had reached the entire country. Hundreds of people sent letters saying, "This man reminded me of my father. This story healed my heart." It was more than a legacy. It was an impact. Elizabeth was responsible for the architectural design, using John's childhood drawings as inspiration. "He believed in my drawings. Now I'll use them to honor him." Mark was in charge of the musical and cultural aspects. He organized choirs, events, and storytelling nights. Daniel handled the legal aspects and partnerships, and Madison took care of the soul of it all. The first twist came with the arrival of an elderly man at the construction site's gate. He was dressed simply, with a grey beard and a frightened look. "I heard they care for forgotten people here." Madison rushed to greet him, and in his eyes she saw something she knew well, pain mixed with hope. His name was Gerald. He'd been abandoned by his daughter weeks before. He cried when he spoke of her, even though he was hurt. "She just needed some time, I think." Madison hugged him. "Here, time is our friend, and no one is forgotten." Gerald was the first official resident, and the beginning of a chain that no one would be able to stop. Over time, others came, men and women with similar stories, each with their own pain, each with a memory held deep within their soul. And there, in that house built out of love, they found not only shelter but redemption. It was as if John's presence continued to circulate between the rooms. But the second major twist arrived in the mail, a handwritten letter with no return address, addressed to Madison. "You don't know me, but I'm Grace's son, your half-sister." Her heart sank. The daughter John thought he'd lost had a son, and that grandson was now searching for her. The young man's name was Caleb. He was 25 years old. He was a teacher and a devout Christian. Upon learning his grandfather's story, he traveled to Michigan to meet Madison. The encounter was moving. He carried with him a diary belonging to his mother, who had died 2 years earlier. "She searched for you, but she didn't know where to begin." Madison wept, as if she had known Grace her entire life. Caleb decided to stay for a while and help out at the home. He took on the chaplaincy. He preached on Sundays and organized prayer groups. It was as if John's blood continued to circulate there, alive, pulsating, multiplied in grace. The brothers welcomed him with emotion. The family, once fractured, now grew in unity. It was then that the state of Michigan, upon learning of the project, proposed state funding for expansion. "You're doing what we should have done decades ago," a representative said. Daniel handled the paperwork, and the third twist was announced. The home would gain branches in 2 more counties. Madison, shocked, asked, "How is this happening?" And Elizabeth replied, her eyes brimming with tears, "Because when the inheritance goes to the right place, it multiplies." John had left what few can, a legacy that transforms, that doesn't end with death, that echoes in every act of love. The home became a documentary. The story found a voice in churches, schools, and events. And on every corner, a forgotten elderly person was rescued by the inspiration of a simple man who chose to forgive. "Honor your father and your mother." The verse now made more sense than ever, because honor can also come later, when there's still time. On a sunny Sunday, Caleb preached a message about seeds. John planted faith, and look at the fruits. His harvest is us. At the end, dozens knelt. An elderly man was baptized. Another reconciled with his children. It was impossible not to cry. It was impossible not to believe. And one of those mornings, something unexpected happened. A woman appeared at the reception with 2 children. It was Lisa, John's granddaughter, Daniel's daughter. "He's never met my children, but I want them to know what he built." Daniel, upon seeing his daughter there, broke down. He hugged everyone. He asked for forgiveness. He cried like never before. Madison watched from afar, her heart warming. He wasn't seeking recognition, but he knew he was at the center of something much bigger than herself. "Thank you, Father, for putting me here." And as she looked up at the sky, she seemed to hear John's voice. "Love is never in vain, my daughter." The last wing of the home was named after Martha, John's wife. There, terminally ill elderly people were cared for with dignity, music, Bible readings, and much affection. Mark composed a song called "Until the Last Second." It played every evening. It was like a hymn of farewell and gratitude. Daniel created a fund to finance scholarships for grandchildren of foster care residents. Elizabeth wrote a book about her father's story. Madison was named the project's general director. And John's name became synonymous with rebirth, a common name but now etched in eternity. And the unexpected inheritance? It wasn't a bank account. It was a calling. It was an altar raised where there had been only abandonment, a sanctuary of love in the midst of pain, and everyone who entered left different, because true love, when given without measure, heals even the wounds that time has tried to hide. Spring has arrived in Michigan, bringing flowers to the gardens of the Restart home. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the hallways early in the morning. But that morning, there was something different in the air, a sense of longing. as if the soul of the place was about to revisit old scars. Daniel woke restless. He walked around the back of the property to the porch where John liked to sit. On the wooden bench still lay the old blue blanket. Touching it, something broke inside him. "I didn't say everything I needed to say, Dad," he whispered. The regret, previously stifled, now overflowed. Mark was in the studio set up in the old warehouse. He tried to compose something new, but the words wouldn't come, only memories of the times he'd turned off his cell phone during his father's calls, of the broken promises, of the postponed visits. And he realized, painfully, that time doesn't restore what neglect steals. Elizabeth, in the home library, was reviewing the final manuscript of her book about John. But one sentence held her back. He died peacefully. She wasn't sure. Did he feel loved or just resigned? The weight of doubt began to grow, because when love goes unspoken, it may be too late. Madison, noticing the silence between the siblings, proposed an idea. "Let's have a special night just for him, a private tribute, no cameras, just us and the memories." Everyone agreed. It would be a way to say what wasn't said, to close open wounds over time, and maybe make room for healing. On the appointed night, the sky was clear. Stars shone like lit candles in the sky. The house was silent. In the main living room, John's photo sat on the fireplace. The Bible opened to Romans 8:38. "Nothing can separate us from the love of God." Around them, the four brothers sat, holding letters in their hands. Madison was the first to read. "Father, you found me when I didn't yet know I needed to be found. The time we lost cannot be recovered, but I can honor you by living with the heart you gave me." Tears fell effortlessly, because healed pain still leaves its mark. Elizabeth, her voice trembling, said, "You always believed in me, and I didn't reciprocate. I ran so hard to build a career and left you alone. If I could go back, I would have stopped, just to hear you tell those stories one more time." She broke down, and the others took her in, because now they were truly siblings. Mark, guitar in his lap, spoke softly. "You taught me to play before I even knew what music was. I played in so many places, but I never played for you. Today I play, only for you." And then he sang a soft melody, made of notes that wept and embraced at the same time. Daniel was last. "I was always the hardest, the coldest, but it was just fear. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of not being enough for you. The problem is, in the end, I was truly insufficient. Not as a son, but as a man. Forgive me." And then he cried like he had never cried before, and was embraced by everyone there. The first major twist came with the arrival of a woman no one expected, Claire, Daniel's ex-wife. "I needed to see this place. I heard everything." She brought with her the young son John had never met. Seeing his grandfather in the photo, the child said, "Is that Grandpa from heaven?" Daniel broke down. Claire revealed something surprising. "John wrote me a letter years ago. He asked me not to let you be separated from your son. He said every man deserves a chance to be better than he was." She handed the letter to Daniel. He read it right there, his voice breaking. "Be the father you needed when you were a child." The second twist happened that same night. Gerald, the home's first resident, had a heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital. On the way, he clutched a letter he'd written to his daughter, whom he hadn't seen in years. "Give this to her if I don't come back. Life is made of encounters and chances that sometimes don't come back." Gerald couldn't resist, and everyone felt the blow, especially Madison, who had grown attached to him. The next morning, Gerald's daughter arrived. Upon receiving her father's letter, she fell to her knees. "I should have come sooner." And there, before the closed casket, a new story of reconciliation was born, albeit one marked by delay. The third and quietest twist came via email. A Seattle woman wrote to Madison, "I'm the daughter of one of the men who lived there. I saw the video of the project. Thank you for taking care of my dad when I failed." The message concluded, Sometimes God uses repentance to heal, even if we only get it later. Madison printed the email and posted it on the house's storyboard. Next to it, a quote from John. "It's never too late until it is." Every day, someone new read that quote and stopped for a few seconds. Some cried, others called family members. The home became not only a shelter, but also a wake-up call. Mark suggested a national campaign, Letter to My Father. Thousands of people sent letters to their fathers, both living and deceased. Letters of forgiveness, gratitude, and longing. Social media exploded with stories. And in every story, one thing was constant: the wish to have said more, to have loved better, to have been present. Elizabeth created a section of the home called the Time Room, a space where seniors could record videos, write letters, and leave messages for their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. An archive of love, because sometimes the words left unsaid in life save lives after death. Daniel began visiting prisons, giving talks to absent fathers. He told his story. He showed John's Bible, and he said, "You still have time. I didn't, but I can help you have it." Many men cried as they listened. Others called their children afterward. His pain became a tool of healing, and Madison, she walked away with her heart at peace. Because even though she only knew her father for a short time, she learned the greatest lesson from him. Love doesn't depend on time. It depends on surrender. And an entire life can be healed in a week if lived with a whole heart. John's home was now a symbol of national redemption. Schools came on field trips, churches sent volunteers, elderly people who had previously been forgotten were now celebrated, and every step his children took on that ground was like an unspoken prayer finally heard by heaven. But not all regrets find time, and that's the hardest wound to heal. That's why Madison ended each talk by saying, "If you can still call, call. If you can still hug, hug. If you can still forgive, forgive." Because when the time comes to say goodbye, the only thing that matters is what's left in your heart. It was an autumn morning, the kind that makes the leaves fall as if time were silently saying goodbye. The home for a new beginning was calm. And for the first time since its founding, all the brothers were gathered without incident, without tragedy, without haste, just to be together. In the main living room, John's painting had earned a permanent place on the wall. Below it, a small plaque read, "Dad, our eternal new beginning." Elizabeth tenderly ran her fingers over the frame. "Funny, I used to avoid even pictures of him. Now I can't stop looking at them." Madison smiled. "It's just that now you see with your heart." Daniel brought up an idea. "I think it's time for a definitive memorial, something that teaches who he was and who we've become because of him." Mark agreed. "But it should be more than just a tribute. It should be useful. A place that continues to teach." And that was the birth of their most ambitious project. They decided to transform the old warehouse on the property into a training center for the children and grandchildren of elderly people. Courses, lectures, workshops, all aimed at building bridges between generations. "Our father left a home. Now we build bridges," said Elizabeth. It was his final lesson, unfolding before them. The first twist in this new phase came with a visit from an elderly man named Alan. He came with a folder in his hands. "I was a classmate of John's when we were young. We worked together at the train station." Everyone was curious. Alan opened the folder. Inside were dozens of letters exchanged between him and John during their youth. "He taught me to write letters of reconciliation. He said each one was a seed of peace." Alan wept. "Because of him, I got my daughter back, my grandchildren, my faith back." Madison read one of the letters aloud. It was simple, yet powerful. "I don't want to be right. I want peace." The entire room fell silent. Alan donated the letters to the training center, and he suggested the name for the space, Honor Station. Everyone approved, and something beautiful was born in that moment. It was no longer just about what John built. It was about what he inspired others to build. A living, breathing, touching legacy. During the shed's renovation, a Bible was found hidden in one of the rafters. Inside, a note from John. "If this place ever shelters the healing of others, then my life will have been worth living." Mark clutched the Bible to his chest. "Dad, it's happening!" And there, they all wept together. The second twist came from the press. An investigative reporter visiting the project discovered that John had quietly helped dozens of people financially, bills paid, debts settled, surgeries financed. Was that him? Yes. He never wanted recognition. He just wanted to see someone back on their feet. The report went viral. Donations poured in from all over the country. The project expanded, and with each new resource, the brothers reaffirmed their pact. Nothing will be used for luxury, everything for purpose. The unexpected inheritance now became a collective mission: honor, love, service, the tripod of John's soul. But the third twist wasn't a happy one. Grace's grandson, Caleb, was diagnosed with leukemia. Young, full of faith, but now facing the struggle of life. Madison was devastated. "Lord, why now?" But Caleb, with inherited serenity, said, "My grandfather taught that honor lies in how we face it, not in how we escape." During treatment, Caleb began writing weekly devotions, lessons from Grandpa John. Thousands of people followed suit, and even while hospitalized, he would say, "If my time is short, may I live long enough to honor his." His faith became a light for many, including his brothers. Caleb didn't resist. He departed in peace. But before he left a final recorded message. "I didn't know my grandfather in life, but I knew his heart and became a part of it. And now I invite you to do the same. Honor those who came before, because every name we forget is a root we lose." At the wake, the home's hall was packed. Former residents, volunteers, children, religious leaders, all held signs. "We are the fruits of the legacy." Elizabeth spoke emotionally. "It's not fair to bury someone so early, but it's fair to recognize that their life was worth more than many that last 100 years. Daniel held his father's Bible, and he read a passage from Ecclesiastes. "Better is the end of a thing than its beginning. Better is patience than pride." Everyone wept, but they also smiled, because there, in a young man's goodbye, was the seed of many new beginnings. In the months that followed, the Honor Station Center became the primary point of family connection throughout the county. Schools sent students. Churches formed partnerships. Families once divided were reunited. John's final lesson was clear: those who honor the past build a different future. And one afternoon, an elderly woman with a slow walk and a sweet voice entered the home. She asked to see John's painting. Looking at it, she whispered, "He took care of my grandson when I couldn't. Now I've come to thank him." Madison approached. "This is your home too." And there another story began. Because love never stops, honor never expires, and legacy only dies if it's not lived. John is gone, but his life goes on. In every gesture of care, in every forgiveness granted, in every tear that turns into an embrace, and that is all he wanted. And now that you know this whole story, I ask you with love in my heart, how many words have been trapped inside you? How many times has pride prevented you from returning, from forgiving, from hearing once again that voice that perhaps today only lives in your memory? Is there still time? Can that phone call you never made still be made? Can that hug you never gave still be offered? Can that letter you wrote but never sent still arrive in time? Have you ever stopped to think about what truly matters at the end of life? When everything falls silent, when the lights go out, what remains? What do you want to leave behind? A full bank account, or a story that transforms lives long after you're gone? If this story touched your heart, perhaps God is calling you to something greater. Maybe today is the day to restore bonds, to heal wounds, to embrace those you left behind. Time doesn't wait, but love persists, always. I want to invite you with all humility to think, who do you need to honor today? Who needs to hear that you love, that you forgive, that you miss them? What legacy do you want to leave? I'd also like to ask you, if this story spoke to you, if something inside you stirred, to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me continue bringing you stories that heal, that touch, that teach. And hit the bell so you don't miss the next ones. And tell me here in the comments, have you ever experienced something similar? Who would you like to honor even if they are gone? Which part of this story touched your soul the most? This space is ours. It's for crying, for remembering, for starting over. And if no one told you today, you are important. Your story matters. Your love can change someone's world.